been a year since the legendary Iron Maiden vocalist Paul Di'Anno left this world, yet of course his legacy still lives on. But the irony is that although a few of the Di'Anno-era songs have always remained in rotation at Iron Maiden live shows, many others get unfairly buried in history, even with the ongoing Run For Your Lives tour.
It's just outrageous.
So today, let's take a look at the Di'Anno-era Iron Maiden songs and look at how often, if ever, they've been played live by Iron Maiden since Paul left the band in 1981. And yes, in case of some of those underrated gems, be rather surprised. Here you go. Real quick, as always, please do not hesitate to comment on anything you hear or see in this video, and especially if you disagree with me, because the whole point of our Up the Irons series is, of course, to start a conversation. But alright, let's do it. First of all, let's kick off with the most obvious ones, the songs that survived the Di'Anno purge and still show up at Maiden's live shows at least every couple of years. But before we even do that, let's get the most obvious one out of the way. As of course the most played Iron Maiden song of all time is from the Paul Di'Anno era, the band's self-titled anthem Iron Maiden, which has been performed a whopping 2,157 times since Paul's departure already. Yeah, by far more than any other song in the band's catalog. The main set closer, the track that signals the end is near right before the encore kicks in, and possibly the only overplayed song in the band's catalog, which no fan can ever get tired of. But if we're being very honest, Iron Maiden is not technically from the Paul Di'Anno era. The band first performed it live on May 1st, 1976 at St. Nicholas Hall in London, and Paul Marriott Day was still the vocalist back then, and Paul Di'Anno wouldn't join until 2 years later. So yeah, I guess we can kind of say that Iron Maiden is one of those songs that cannot really be characterized into any era of this band. It goes far beyond it, as whether you like it or not, it is the song that basically contains the DNA of Iron Maiden itself. Another two songs from the early days of Iron Maiden, which have remained the Maiden staples at their shows after Paul's departure, are of course Running Free and Sanctuary, without which it was virtually impossible to even imagine an Iron Maiden show back in the 1980s.
Everybody everywhere, this is a song from the first Iron Maiden album. So go, Running Free, let it rip.
But the craziest thing, it has actually changed quite a lot in the 21st century. And Sanctuary, for example, has been played live last in 2014, and Running Free all the way back in 2013, which is more than 12 years ago already. And even more, Iron Maiden for some reason decided to not even include it in the current Run For Your Lives tour, which was actually a huge surprise to me, and I'm sure to many more Iron Maiden fans. And given the fact that we know for sure that this tour will be the last tour which will concentrate on the early days of Iron Maiden, I kind of wonder if Iron Maiden fans will ever have a chance to hear those songs being played live ever again.
Run to the hills, come on!
And another survivor, which has actually survived until today, is of course Wrathchild. A track so raw and punchy, it refuses to die. Like Iron Maiden, it debuted at the same show in 1976 and went on to become a regular staple across decades. And the craziest thing is that although Wrathchild is actually not the most played song in the band's catalog, like by far, still Iron Maiden did perform it at least a handful of times at almost every tour they went on since 1983. Even if it didn't stay in the setlist for the entire duration of that particular run. Oh, and by the way, given the fact that Wrathchild is actually included in the current Run For Your Lives tour, which as we all know will continue in 2026, well, by the end of it, Wrathchild will actually become the most played Paul Di'Anno era Iron Maiden song after Iron Maiden itself. Now guys, just to make it clear, I'm not gonna go through every song from the first two Iron Maiden albums in this video and talk about how many times it has or has not been performed live after Paul left this band, because that episode would be just utterly boring. But instead, I would like to concentrate on some interesting facts and peculiarities. Like, for example, the resurrected songs. Songs that disappeared from Maiden's setlist for decades, only to return on their Run for Your Lives tour this year. And the first of those is, of course, Murders in a Room Work. Now, first of all, Murders hadn't been played live for nearly 20 years before it exploded back into the setlist this year, and last time Maiden performed it was September 2nd, 2005 at the final Eddie Rips Up the World show in London's Carling Apollo Hammersmith. And even before that tour, the only post-Di'Anno appearances were a handful of shows during the virtual 11 World Tour in 1998. Just 8 performances in total, to be precise. And that's it. Before 1982 and 2025, that song basically vanished. But not anymore. Now it's finally back. And in all honesty, it was possibly the biggest surprise of the Run for Your Lives setlist, at least for me. And definitely a very, very pleasant one. And then there's Killers, the criminally underrated title track from Iron Maiden's second album. And this one had been MIA for even longer. 26 years since its last live performance in 1999.
And between the Beast on the Road tour and the Ed Hunter run, which came before Run for Your Lives, the only time it showed up in an Iron Maiden setlist was for just 16 shows of a 7th tour in 1988. And even during the time with Blaze Bayley, when Iron Maiden tried to incorporate as many songs as possible from the Di'Anno era, they did not play it live. And by the way, talking about the Blaze era, Virtual 11 actually became a pretty good tour for Di'Anno era songs.
Which I guess is pretty understandable, as during that tour, Iron Maiden tried to include more songs that would fit Blaze Bayley's vocals better than some of the Bruce Dickinson era songs. And at the same time, I underline that Iron Maiden is much more than just the post-1983 catalog that they have. And the band did live without Bruce in the band before 1983, and they will survive without Bruce once again. But nevertheless, even with that, it's been over 2 decades since Killers sounded live from the stage before Run for Your Lives tour. And in my opinion, it's simply a crime against humanity, as Killers, at least to me, has always been the track that perfectly symbolizes the early days of Iron Maiden, both with its aggression and punk rock sharpness and melody that will eventually prevail in the latter part of the Iron Maiden catalog. And so yes, I am extremely happy that both Killers and Murders in a Room Work have finally made their way back onto the stage, as at least to me, both of those tracks definitely deserve the spotlight. By the way guys, if you are planning to attend the second leg of the Run for Your Lives tour and you would like to represent our amazing heavy metal community there, just know that you can do so in a Metal Poker merch like this, or like this, or a bunch of other designs, and I'll be more than happy to send it pretty much anywhere across the world. So if you have a spare minute, please check it out via a link in the description to this video. But while Iron Maiden did bring back a couple of long-lost Di'Anno-era songs onto the Run for Your Life setlist, not all the tracks from the early days were as lucky as those two. And some of the fan favorites, without which it was simply impossible to imagine an Iron Maiden show back in the early 1980s, are still missing. Like, for example, Another Life from Killers. The last time Maiden performed it was on September 2nd, 2005, during the final night of the same Eddie Rips Up the World tour in London. And before that, you would have to go back all the way to 1982 for it to be played live. So, nearly 2 decades in the shadows. Meaning that this song, which is actually a fan favorite for many diehard Iron Maiden fans, and I know this for a fact, has only been played live together with Bruce Dickinson on 1 tour. Which, if you think about it, is actually a big surprise. And the same goes for Remember Tomorrow, although if we're being very honest, that one did get a tiny bit more lucky over the years. After Di'Anno left, Maiden did bring it back a handful of times, and it showed up during the same Early Days tour in 2005. And in addition to that, Bruce even performed it with Metallica when Maiden were inducted into the Golden Gods Hall of Fame, which, by the way, shows how much this song had an influence on the early thrash metal. But that's a topic for a completely different video. But even between then and 1981, the only time Iron Maiden did include it into the setlist was on their 1993 Real Live tour, which by the way also was the only tour on which Iron Maiden also performed Transylvania live after Paul Di'Anno's departure from the band. And then of course we also got Drifter and Prowler, my personal favorite songs from the early days of Iron Maiden, whose situation is pretty much exactly the same as the one described above. And the only other song from the Paul Di'Anno era, which I guess is more or less stable at an Iron Maiden setlist, well, once again, more or less stable, is of course Phantom of the Opera, Iron Maiden's proto-epic song, which would lay the foundations for all the grand classics that would come afterwards. But that's about it. The rest of the songs from the Paul Di'Anno era, including the legendary Strange World, which was last time performed all the way back in Japan in 1981, have actually never sounded live after Paul's departure from Iron Maiden. And that, my friends, is a very, very sad statistics. And once again, I do understand why this is happening. I'm not saying that Iron Maiden are not trying to include those. No, quite the opposite. Iron Maiden is actually one of those bands that tries to, incorporate all of the eras of their catalog, onto the set list for their die-hard fans. But because this band has so many incredible songs, some of the masterpieces from the early days still remain to be absolutely ignored. Even today, when Iron Maiden are celebrating the early days of Iron Maiden. If those early songs would be in a catalog of most other heavy metal songs, then it would have been the concert stables and the biggest hit those bands have ever had. But then, if we're being fair, we also have to point out that there is at least one song which, to everyone's surprise, Iron Maiden have never performed live. With anyone, not with Paul, not with Bruce, not with Blaze, not in any shape or form. And that one, of course, being Prodigal Son, which has never sounded live until October 5th, 2025, when at the Keep It True festival, Blaze Bayley joined the other three early Iron Maiden band members, those being Terry Rance, Terry Wopram, and Thunderstick, to finally give this song justice in honor of the late Paul Di'Anno. And it was beautiful. And by the way, here I have to point out that although I do understand why Prodigal Son was left out when Bruce joined and even was never performed together with Blaze Bayley in the band, but I am actually rather surprised that Iron Maiden have never performed this song when Paul was in the band. As at least to me, just as Mike Stagno of Sputnik Music once called it, it is a refreshing change from the heaviness of the rest of the album. And he is absolutely right. It is a soft, melodic and little haunting piece. And although it is quite different from what people expected from Iron Maiden back in 1981, it would actually feel right at home at the later Iron Maiden tour, such as, for example, the ones in support of their The Book of Souls tour. But that, of course, is just my opinion. And then there are also a couple of songs which Iron Maiden did play quite heavily in the early days, disappeared completely from their setlist when Paul Di'Anno joined. Like, for example, Invasion, originally the B-side to Women in Uniform EP, which was mostly played live in autumn of 1979, and the last time it was ever played by the band was on December 19th at the Music Machine, and once again was not touched until Keep It True Festival this year. The same goes for Burning Ambition, which was only played 5 times in total in early 1979, and of course the legendary The Ides of March, which, as far as I know, has been performed live only once ever. And although of course it does sound from the stage every night at this latest Run for Your Lives tour, today it only does so on tape. But nevertheless, Paul Di'Anno left Iron Maiden nearly 45 years ago, and yet still, the first two albums, Iron Maiden and Killers, still stand as some of the most raw, energetic and era-defining records in heavy metal history. And to many Iron Maiden fans, those two are actually their favorite Maiden records ever. And to this very day, 9 Di'Anno-era songs were never played live again after he left this band. A good chunk of those disappeared for decades. Entire albums, Killers especially, were skipped entirely on multiple tours, and if it wasn't for the title track from Iron Maiden, the whole record might have gone untouched live since 2013. And once again, I totally understand why it is so. Iron Maiden is one of the greatest heavy metal bands on the planet, and they have so many incredible songs, all of which of course do deserve to be played live. And yes, many of those were written after Paul left the band. But at the same time, remembering the late Paul Di'Anno, I want to point out that no, although Run for Your Lives tour is supposedly the last tour to concentrate on the early days of Iron Maiden, I still hope that Iron Maiden will find a way to incorporate more early songs into their future setlists, and preferably those that, although are fan favorites, were vastly ignored by the band for the past decades. And if they do that on the future tours, I am more than sure that every word of each of those songs will be screamed from the top of their lungs by every die-hard Iron Maiden fan. Because no matter what, those are the songs that shaped the early days of one of the greatest heavy metal bands to ever walk this earth.
I love it tonight.
But anyways, which is your personal favorite song from the Paul Di'Anno era of Iron Maiden, and which of those do you think Iron Maiden should play live on future tours? Please let us know in the comments. As always, thank you so much for watching this video, guys, and we will prevail. Slava Ukraini!